There is a supposedly scientific claim that some trolls use to let them ignore what people actually say and replace it with whatever crap they want people to believe. As such, it's pretty despicable. I don't mean the claim itself, but how it is abused. Pretty much any good thing can be misused, but I'll get into real examples of that in my next video. For this one, I'm going to be showing that the so-called scientific claim is not only wrong on its face, but provably wrong. The basic claim is that words are only 7% of general communication. Before proceeding to demolish this claim, does it make any sense to you? While it is true that sometimes science can prove things are true when they would seem to be impossible, this isn't one of those times. Let's start with applying common sense by looking at 3 test scenarios. Test number 1. Read the transcript of 2 people communicating. In other words, you only know the words they used, no audio for tonality, and you aren't watching them, so there is no body language to evaluate. You only know who is speaking during the conversation and what the words are. It would be much like reading a book where 2 people are having a discussion, except it won't include any extra details like John angrily responded. You would only know John was talking, but without any descriptive text about their tone. The question is, how much do you think you would understand about that conversation? More than 7%? I bet you would say you would know far, far more than that. You'd probably understand the vast majority of what the written conversation was conveying. Test number 2. Listen to a conversation, but don't watch the participants. Now, you still know all the words and who is speaking, but also their tone of voice for each word. You'd pick up on anger, joy, sadness, etc. Certainly this gives you more information than just reading the words. The question is, how much do you think you'd understand about that conversation? 45%? I suspect, in most cases, that you would know almost all of the meaning in the conversation. Which brings us to the last test. Watch a conversation. Maybe 2 people on a TV talk show, but without any sound. You can only see their body language. What percentage of the conversation do you think you'd understand? How much is communicated to you? 55%? I suspect, in most cases, very little. Now, the percentages I mentioned were not just randomly chosen. They are based on the percentages some people claim applies to each of these 3 elements of communication. That is, words, tonality, and body language. You see, the claim some people make, and it can be found all over the internet, is that communication is only 7% words. That's what the first test covered. Do you really think only 7% makes sense? The second test covered the words with their tonality. The claim is that tonality is 38% of communication. That is, how you say those words. Since we can't separate the tone from the words, the combined total is the 45% I mentioned above. Don't you think you'd know much more than that? That leaves a whopping 55% of communication supposedly being body language. That was our third test. But in most cases, you wouldn't have gotten much understanding at all with just body language. Yet look up the issue on the internet and most think the claim is true. But those sites, which includes university sources, are generally just repeating the claim and maybe saying where the study came from, but normally don't analyze it at all. Why is this important? If you follow political or social issues much, you'll probably have seen cases where a leader on one side will be accused of saying something bad by the opposing side. Well, if you are like me, you go looking for the original source material. This would usually be a speech or interview or something similar. When I find it, often it turns out they not only didn't say what they were accused of, but may have pretty much said the opposite. And this is where we get to today's tactic. When confronted with these facts, these accusers make a statement like, they may not have said it, but that's what they meant. Huh? How does that work? Well, they use this silly claim that the words are only 7% of communication. That lets them literally ignore what a person said. Thus, it doesn't matter anymore what someone says. Instead, we get the repetition equals truth tactic. These unethical people just claim that body language reveals the truth. Very interesting. Also very convenient. By an amazing coincidence, that nonverbal stuff always supports the accuser. challenge their claims, and they just say you are too ignorant to understand body language, but apparently they are always experts. This unethical tactic is just a method to avoid debating political and social issues on the merits. You see, instead of each side making what they think are their best arguments, it becomes one side claiming to understand body language better than the other side. That repetition thing again. And any challenge to that is just laughed off, which, by the way, is what kids who think they are cool in junior high school do when someone makes them look bad. As you probably saw, if you even thought through these 3 tests I gave, the basis of the claim just doesn't make sense anyway. So maybe there is something about the claim research that is misleading. Surprise, there is. It came from 2 different studies in 1967, neither of which covered all 3 elements. Rather, each covered just a portion, so there is no actual overall study that compared all 3 things. And there are other problems with it. First, it was a very small sample that was tested. One only tested 37 people. Second, all subjects were, and I quote, female University of California undergraduates who participated in the study in partial fulfillment of introductory psychology course requirements. In other words, not a diverse group at all, besides being very small. Even the ages would have been quite restricted since it was just undergraduates taking their first course in psychology. Third, and especially important, is the fact that the study was not about conversation or speech or anything like that. It was, in fact, only studying the impact of single words. One of the studies used the word maybe. The other study only used 9 different words individually, which brings up another problem. Some words simply carry more meaning than others. The word maybe was chosen because it didn't carry much meaning by itself. So of course the test subjects couldn't get much out of it. The test was designed to make that difficult. Seems pretty worthless to me when evaluating a real conversation or speech. Am I saying there's no value in reading body language? Of course not. But when you start assuming your reading of body language trumps all else, you are going to often be making assumptions about individuals that are wrong and probably just conveniently self-serving. It's the nature of confirmation bias, and you are certainly avoiding real discussion. And remember that all your biases come into play, which is more likely to lead you to a preconceived interpretation. I may suspect someone is lying because of body language, but I'm not going to go around publicly saying they are a liar because I may well be wrong. Unfortunately, it seems common, even acceptable, to make accusations based on such flawed and limited research. If someone doesn't look you in the eye when saying something, does that mean they are lying? Many think so, but good liars will make it a point to look you right in the eye, while a naturally shy person may not, even when telling the absolute truth. Let's look at some general examples. Certainly tonality matters, and I'll give a word the study actually used. The word was maybe. Suppose a friend tells you they are sure a football team, which is a 2-point underdog, is going to win the game. You may respond by saying, maybe, and that tone of voice would express that you see it as a reasonable possibility, but also that you aren't as sure about it as your friend is. But suppose your friend predicted the winning team will be the one that is a 25-point underdog. Then you may respond with, maybe, but in that tone of voice, you are showing that while it is a possibility, you don't find it very likely. So, tonality does matter, mostly for elaboration, but less so for actually changing the meaning of the words. If you only saw the maybe answer in written form, would you have missed 93% of the meaning? I don't think so. But so far I've only challenged the claim on the basis of common sense. Maybe you think that the science must be right, so I must be missing something. Nope. Because I found an interview with the author of the 2 studies all this is based on, and he said the idea that words are only 7% of communication is, to use his word for it, absurd. Not only that, he said the studies were not even about general communication. Rather, they were only about the communication of emotion. But don't take my word for it. Here is the pertinent part of the interview.
My intent was to study communication of emotions. Unfortunately, a lot of people, I don't know what their reasons are, but they decided to overgeneralize my findings and make them sound as if they were for communication in general, which would be absurd.
So, sorry, but all the claims about this scientific research were wrong no matter how you analyze it. But since so many people believe it, many people take advantage of it to abuse others. My next video will deal with the troll channel that promoted this the most. He presented it as a fact, and instead of providing backup for his claim, he said I was the one who needed to research it. You remember the go fetch tactic I talked about before, right? But when he told me to research it, I had already provided a video which is almost exactly like this one. In other words, I had already done the research and provided it. The troll did nothing more than insist he was correct, and also misrepresented what I said about the whole issue. I'll call this troll Mickey Mouth, and yes, I will be using his clips in my next video to prove what I say about him. He makes a great many illogical and hypocritical arguments. Thanks for watching, and don't let the troll stop you from speaking out.